Okay, so this is level 2 questioning, and level 2 is getting a little bit more challenging than level 1. Level 1 was your most basic, easy questions because you could point to the answer straight in the text and there it was, written down for you. Level 2 means that we have to read between the lines. So we've got to start interpreting information. Proficient readers, those readers who are good, you're good at reading, you're good at making connections, they make interpretations or explanations based on the details in the text. When you're reading, you need to be asking yourself questions that you can answer with making inferences or assumptions, and you make inferences and assumptions based on evidence in the text. So you might ask yourself questions like, what does a detail or image represent? What does it suggest? What does it personify? These kind of questions mean that we can interpret, classify, compare information, contrast information, or we just try to find patterns. The questions are interpretive, and they answer questions like how or why. So I've given you a couple of examples here. And again, it's from chapter 1. So your first question here, why was James Fort no longer mentioned in historical records after the 1630s? If I look at the beginning of this question, it says why, which matches right here. Why was James Fort no longer mentioned in historical records after the 1630s? I remember seeing that. And I've got it pulled up for us. And it's mentioned in this paragraph here. So I'm going to read this whole paragraph. The people of Jamestown built more homes and government buildings. They grew crops, operated businesses, raised families, buried their dead. In their quest for land and riches, the settlers spread out into other areas of the Virginia colony, and they built plantations. In the 17th century, the word plantation meant farm, and Jamestown quickly outgrew the area of James Fort. The materials used in the fort's construction were removed and used for other building projects. By the time the historical record reaches the 1630s, all mention of James Fort is gone. Well, I can interpret this text. So your settlers here in James Fort, as they established themselves there, the longer they lived there, the more that they wanted to grow their colony. So they were growing bigger farms, they were making more businesses, their families were growing, so it meant the population was growing. They were burying their dead, so they had to have cemeteries. They outgrew the fort. They needed more land. And because the fort, what makes a fort is you've got these walls that surround it, they had to take it down in order for the land to grow, in order for their town to grow. So James Fort is no longer mentioned because it became Jamestown. Jamestown needed more land than James Fort provided. Question number 2, why is the excavation of a grave such a long process? Oh, there's a lot of information for this. So, let me scroll down. Okay, so this kind of starts on page 14. You can see the page right here, page 14. Let's see. Excavation removes soil and other evidence of the past that can never be replaced exactly as it was. When you dig up dirt, you can't put that dirt back exactly the same way it was. That dirt's been moved. It's been shifted around. Yet new discoveries often prompt scientists to rethink their conclusions about a past excavation. They need to be able to review the site as it was before the digging took place. So even though they're digging or after the fact, they need to be able to look back at it the way it was before any of this happened. So that means they have to be very precise in their record keeping, taking photos, making diagrams and maps of each step of that excavation process. It's a very slow process because they're constantly making new records of it. So that partially answers question number 2. Why is the excavation of a grave such a long process? Well, they have to make such meticulous records of everything. But now it says a grave. So I want to go back and find what it says explicitly about a grave. So I'm on page 18. And page 18 is a lot of information about digging up graves. But what stood out to me was a lot of the graves that they were uncovering in Jamestown were unmarked. That means that there were no tombstones there. When we go to a cemetery today, we see tombstones and it tells us who's buried there, the year they were born, the year they died. But a lot of times in these really old burial grounds, you didn't have that. So, since graves are often in unexpected places, how do archaeologists first know that they may have located one? Well, you and I might take it for granted. We may think we're walking across just flat land and there's nothing there. But once again, they look at important clues in the soil, in the dirt. So, unless a person's been trained in archaeology, an unmarked grave might not be obvious to us. What they do is they look at the stains on the surface of the subsoil. When people bury a body, they dig a pit called a grave shaft, and after placing the body back in the grave, they backfill it, so they put that soil back in. But because the backfill soil contains the mixed soils of the excavated layers, it's a different color than the soil that forms the wall of the grave shaft. So they look at the stain that remains there even centuries later. So one of the things that makes it hard is that they're having to look at different colored soil as a sign that there might be a body there. When they uncover a soil stain that approaches 6 feet long or by 2 feet wide, that's about the size of a human body or its coffin, they feel confident they've found a grave. Now, they have to be extremely slow in this because they have to make sure that they are not finding any type of artifact. So at this point, the team is shifted to standard procedure for grave excavations. They take a photo of the stain of the grave shaft. So that photo is that permanent record of what it looked like before the excavation. Then they have to remove the soil and place it in buckets. And as each bucket is taken out of the grave shaft, remember, it's sifted through a mesh screen, and that mesh screen has really tiny holes that catch any type of artifact that might be there. So they're literally digging through this grave bucket by bucket of dirt. Some things that they might be looking for in each bucket: buttons, coins, and we know those objects are so tiny. So the archaeologists have to keep their eyes peeled for all signs of burial, not just bones. They have to look for parts of a coffin. So because this is like from the 1600s and 1700s, you might not have an intact coffin. You might be looking for bits of wood or nails. Let's see. And even as they get deeper and deeper into the grave, they have to become extremely slow and meticulous with their digging, their scientific methods and procedures, because they could find something at any moment. So right here, it says that they have to give each object that they find a unique identifying number. So they're going through, they're looking for every bit of artifact, and they have to number it. They have to take pictures. They have to make records. So why is the excavation of a grave such a long process? Well, they have to go through and make sure that they find, first of all, the correct grave. They have to sift through buckets of dirt and find all types of artifacts. They have to take pictures. They have to name everything because they want to make sure that they are looking at the grave in its entirety. They don't want to mess anything up. In your assignment, in this space below, you need to come up with 2 level 2 questions for chapter 1. Remember, these questions can be answered through interpretation, classifying information, comparing or contrasting information, so how things are similar or how things are different, or finding patterns. We need to be able to answer the questions how and why. After you write your question, I want you to give me the answer in a complete sentence. So again, here's your text box. I've set it up for you. Type out your question, give me the answer, and you're going to do this twice.